What happens when America's beloved morning show host goes head-to-head with a royal who thinks he's untouchable? You won't believe what unfolds when Prince Harry sits down with Hoda, expecting another softball interview, only to find himself facing the toughest questions of his media career. The gloves came off, voices were raised, and by the end of this explosive encounter, one of them would storm off the set in a fury that left the entire studio in stunned silence. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of Today started like any other morning, with Hoda's signature warm smile and that familiar coffee cup in hand. The studio buzzed with its usual energy as cameras rolled and millions of Americans tuned in for their daily dose of news and celebrity interviews. But what nobody expected was that this seemingly peaceful Tuesday morning would explode into one of the most dramatic confrontations in daytime television history. Prince Harry had arrived at 30 Rock with his usual entourage, looking polished in his navy blazer and that practiced smile he's perfected over years of royal appearances. The Duke of Sussex seemed relaxed, almost cocky, as he settled into the plush interview chair across from Hoda. His team had briefed him that this would be a friendly chat about his latest charitable endeavors and upcoming projects. They couldn't have been more wrong. Hoda opened with her trademark warmth, welcoming Harry to the show with genuine enthusiasm. "Prince Harry, thank you so much for being here this morning. It's always such a pleasure to have you." Her voice carried that maternal quality that had endeared her to viewers for decades, but there was something different in her eyes today. A sharpness that suggested she had done her homework and wasn't planning to pull any punches. Harry leaned back casually, his posture screaming confidence. "Thanks for having me, Hoda. Always love coming on the show." His British accent carried that familiar charm, but seasoned viewers might have noticed the slight tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the armrests, just a fraction tighter than usual. "So let's talk about your recent statements regarding the royal family," Hoda began, her tone still friendly but noticeably more direct than her usual celebrity interviews. "You've been quite vocal about your experiences, and I have to say, some of your claims have raised eyebrows on both sides of the Atlantic." The shift in Harry's demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. His practiced smile faltered for just a moment, replaced by a flash of irritation that he quickly tried to mask. "Well, Hoda, I think it's important to set the record straight about what actually happened behind palace walls. The truth needs to come out." "The truth," Hoda repeated, leaning forward slightly. "That's an interesting word choice, Harry. Because there seem to be multiple versions of the truth floating around, don't there? Your version, your family's version, and what actually happened." Harry's eyes narrowed, and viewers could practically see the gears turning in his head as he realized this wasn't going to be the friendly chat his handlers had promised. "I'm sorry, are you suggesting I'm lying about my own experiences? About what I lived through?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Hoda replied smoothly, her journalist instincts kicking into high gear. "I'm asking direct questions that I think our viewers deserve direct answers to. For instance, your claims about being cut off financially by your father. Palace sources have provided documentation showing that significant support continued well into 2021. How do you reconcile that with your public statements?" The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees as Harry straightened in his chair, his casual demeanor evaporating completely. "Palace sources," he scoffed, his voice taking on an edge that longtime royal watchers recognized as dangerous territory. "The same palace sources that have been briefing against me and my wife for years? The same sources that leaked private family conversations to the press?" Hoda didn't back down, her years of experience handling difficult interviews serving her well. "But Harry, we're not talking about anonymous sources here. We're talking about financial records, documented evidence that contradicts some of your most serious allegations. Don't you think the American public deserves clarity on these discrepancies?" "Clarity?" Harry's voice rose slightly, and several crew members exchanged nervous glances. "I'll tell you what lacks clarity, Hoda. The way my family threw me and my wife under the bus while protecting Andrew. The way they refused to protect Meghan from racist attacks in the British press. The way they actively worked against us while we were supposedly working for the same institution. Those are serious accusations, Hoda acknowledged, her tone remaining professional but firm. But let's focus on specifics. You've claimed that conversations about your son's skin color took place within the royal family. Yet when pressed for details, you've been notably vague. If these conversations happened as you described, why not provide the full context? Harry's face flushed visibly, his hands now gripping the chair arms so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Are you seriously asking me to name family members and expose them to the kind of hatred and vitriol that Meghan faced? Are you asking me to put targets on their backs? I'm asking for accountability, Hoda shot back, her voice still controlled but carrying more steel than viewers were accustomed to hearing from the usually gentle host. You made explosive claims that damaged reputations and relationships. You profited enormously from those claims through book deals, Netflix contracts, and speaking fees. If you're going to make allegations that serious, don't you have a responsibility to back them up with facts rather than implications? The studio fell eerily quiet except for the hum of cameras still rolling, capturing every moment of this unexpected confrontation. Harry's media training was clearly at war with his impulse to lash out, his jaw working as he struggled to maintain composure. You know what, Hoda, Harry said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. I came here thinking you were different. I thought you understood what it meant to be part of a marginalized community, to face discrimination, and have to fight for your place. But apparently, you're just another establishment mouthpiece willing to carry water for the same system that tried to destroy my family. The accusation hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode, and Hoda's expression shifted from professional courtesy to something much more intense. The battle lines had been drawn, and what happened next would determine whether this interview could be salvaged or if it would spiral completely out of control. But Harry wasn't finished. His eyes blazed with a mixture of anger and wounded pride as he leaned forward, pointing an accusatory finger in Hoda's direction. You want specifics? You want accountability? Let's talk about accountability for the media machine that hounded my mother to her death and then tried to do the same thing to my wife. The invocation of Princess Diana's death sent shockwaves through the studio, but Hoda didn't flinch. If anything, her expression hardened as she recognized the manipulation tactic for what it was. Years of interviewing politicians and celebrities had taught her to spot when someone was trying to weaponize tragedy to avoid accountability. Harry, nobody disputes the tragedy of what happened to your mother, Hoda said, her voice steady but carrying an unmistakable edge. But using her memory to deflect from legitimate questions about your own inconsistencies isn't going to work here. We're not the British tabloids. We're not your enemies. We're asking the questions that millions of Americans are thinking, but are too polite to ask. Harry's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, indignation, and finally barely controlled rage. Deflect, deflect. His voice cracked with fury as he half rose from his chair before catching himself. My mother died because of media harassment, and you're sitting here doing exactly the same thing. You're attacking me, attacking my credibility, all while pretending to be some neutral journalist. I'm not attacking anyone, Hoda replied firmly, her maternal warmth completely gone now, replaced by the steel of a veteran broadcaster who had covered wars and scandals. I'm doing my job, something that apparently makes you uncomfortable when it doesn't go according to your carefully crafted narrative. The studio crew watched in fascination and horror as two media titans squared off in what was rapidly becoming the most explosive television moment of the year. Harry's handlers in the green room were frantically gesturing at producers, but Hoda had made it clear that this interview would continue until she got the answers she was looking for. My narrative? Harry's laugh was bitter and harsh. You mean the narrative where I watched my wife contemplate suicide because of the racist treatment she received? The narrative where my own family refused to defend her against vicious attacks? That narrative, Hoda? No, Harry, Hoda shot back, her voice rising for the first time. I mean the narrative where you selectively edit your story depending on your audience. The narrative where you claim to want privacy while doing tell-all interviews and reality shows. The narrative where you position yourself as a victim while simultaneously profiting from that victimhood. The words hit Harry like physical blows, and his composure finally cracked completely. "How dare you?" he snarled, his aristocratic accent becoming more pronounced as his anger peaked. "How dare you sit there in your comfortable American studio and lecture me about what I've been through? You have no idea what it's like to have your entire life dissected, to have every word twisted, to watch the woman you love be destroyed by the same machine that killed your mother." "You're absolutely right," Hoda said, leaning back in her chair with a calmness that was infuriating Harry even more. "I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like to be held accountable for my words and actions. I know what it's like to face tough questions and answer them honestly instead of hiding behind trauma and tragedy." Harry's hands were shaking now, his carefully constructed public persona completely shattered. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he said, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "This is the same aggressive, invasive questioning that drove Meghan to the brink, the same relentless pursuit that made our lives impossible in Britain. The difference, Harry," Hoda continued relentlessly, "is that I'm asking about statements you made publicly, claims you put out there for profit. If you didn't want to face questions about your allegations, maybe you shouldn't have made them on international television for millions of dollars." The studio fell silent except for the whir of cameras capturing every moment of Harry's meltdown. His media training was completely gone now, replaced by raw emotion and wounded pride. "You know what your problem is, Hoda?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You think because you've sat in this chair for years, because you've interviewed celebrities and politicians, that gives you the right to tear down people who've actually suffered real trauma. And you think," Hoda replied with devastating precision, "that your trauma gives you the right to make serious allegations without being held accountable for them. You think your pain entitles you to damage other people's reputations and relationships without consequences." Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the studio floor with a harsh sound that made everyone jump. "This interview is over," he declared, his voice shaking with rage. "I will not sit here and be ambushed by someone who clearly has an agenda." "The only agenda I have," Hoda said, remaining seated and maintaining her composure even as Harry towered over her, "is getting to the truth, something you seem allergic to when it doesn't serve your purposes." "The truth?" Harry's laugh was hysterical now, completely unhinged. "You want the truth? The truth is that people like you, people in positions of power who could have made a difference, chose to stay silent while my wife was being destroyed. The truth is that you're all complicit in a system that protects the establishment and tears down anyone who dares to challenge it." "Harry," Hoda said, her voice cutting through his rant like a knife, "the only person destroying anything here is you. You're destroying your own credibility with every word that comes out of your mouth." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and for a moment, the entire studio held its breath. Harry's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, hurt, and finally, incandescent rage that seemed to consume him from the inside out. "You know what, Hoda?" Harry said, his voice now eerily calm in a way that was somehow more terrifying than his earlier shouting. "I've spent years trying to be diplomatic, trying to take the high road, trying to protect people who never protected me, but I'm done with that now." He began pacing behind his chair like a caged animal, his movements sharp and erratic. The studio cameras followed his every move as he seemed to be having some kind of internal breakdown in real time. "You want to know about credibility? Let's talk about your credibility. Let's talk about how you've built your career on being America's sweetheart while asking softball questions to celebrities and politicians who pay your salary." Hoda remained perfectly still in her chair, her expression unreadable as she watched Harry self-destruct before her eyes. "Harry, you're making this personal when it doesn't need to be. All I've done is ask you to back up the claims you've made publicly. That's journalism, not persecution." "Journalism?" Harry spun around to face her directly, his eyes wild with fury. "This isn't journalism, this is a hit job. You brought me here under false pretenses, promised a friendly interview about my charity work, and instead ambushed me with tabloid-level attacks designed to humiliate me on national television. Nobody promised you anything except an honest conversation," Hoda replied evenly, If you expected me to just nod along while you repeated the same talking points you've been peddling for years, you came to the wrong show. Harry's laugh was bitter and unhinged. Oh, I see what this is really about now. This is about ratings, isn't it? You figured you could make a name for yourself by taking down a member of the royal family. Well, congratulations, Hoda. You've succeeded in showing America exactly what kind of person you really are. The accusation was so outrageous, so completely divorced from reality, that several crew members actually gasped audibly. Hoda's eyes flashed with genuine anger for the first time in the interview. What kind of person I really am, she repeated slowly, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Harry, I've been doing this job for over 2 decades. I've interviewed presidents and prime ministers, survivors of tragedies and heroes who saved lives. I don't need to make a name for myself by destroying a petulant prince who can't handle being asked real questions. The word petulant hit Harry like a physical slap. His face went completely white, then flushed deep red as the insult sank in. Petulant? He repeated, his voice cracking with disbelief. Petulant. I lost my mother when I was 12 years old. I served my country in Afghanistan. I've dedicated my life to charitable causes and supporting veterans. And you have the unmitigated gall to call me petulant? Yes, Hoda said with devastating simplicity, because that's exactly what you're being. You're acting like a spoiled child who's upset that someone finally called you out on your inconsistencies and lies. The studio fell into complete silence. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, as they witnessed what was clearly the end of Harry's composure. His breathing became rapid and shallow. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Lies, he whispered, the words seeming to physically pain him. You're calling me a liar. On national television. To millions of people. His voice began to rise again, building to a crescendo. Well, let me tell you something about lies, Hoda. The biggest lie is the one you're perpetuating right now. The lie that the media is somehow neutral, that you're just asking innocent questions, when what you're really doing is character assassination. The only person assassinating your character here is you. Hoda shot back without hesitation. Every word out of your mouth, every accusation, every attempt to play the victim is destroying whatever credibility you had left. You came here as a prince, but you're leaving as exactly what everyone suspected you were, a spoiled, entitled man-child who can't handle the consequences of his own actions. The insult was so brutal, so precisely aimed at Harry's deepest insecurities, that it seemed to physically stagger him. He gripped the back of his chair for support, his knuckles white with the effort of keeping himself upright. How dare you? He breathed, his voice barely audible. How dare you speak to me like that? Do you have any idea who I am? Do you have any concept of what my family has given to this world? What I've sacrificed? I know exactly who you are, Hoda replied with ice-cold precision. You're a man who traded his family's privacy and dignity for Netflix money. You're someone who claims to want a quiet life while doing everything possible to stay in the spotlight. You're a person who uses his mother's death and his wife's struggles as shields to deflect from legitimate criticism. Harry's composure finally shattered completely. Enough! He roared, his voice echoing through the studio with such force that several crew members jumped backward. I will not sit here and listen to this garbage from someone who wouldn't know real suffering if it bit her in the face. He began ripping off his microphone with violent, jerky movements, the sound of tearing fabric audible as he yanked the wire free from his jacket. This interview is over. This conversation is over. And my relationship with this network, with this show, with you is over. Harry, please, one of his handlers called from off camera, but he whirled around with such fury that the man immediately stepped back. Don't you dare tell me to calm down, Harry snarled at his own team. You brought me here. You told me this would be safe. You promised me this woman would be respectful. He turned back to Hoda, his face twisted with rage. But there's nothing respectful about what just happened here. This was character assassination, pure and simple. Hoda remained completely calm, watching his meltdown with the detached professionalism of someone who had seen it all before. Harry, you're having a public breakdown on live television. Maybe it's time to take a step back and think about what that says about you, not about me." The observation was so accurate, so damning in its simplicity, that it seemed to break something fundamental in Harry's psyche. He stared at her for a long moment, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air, clearly struggling to form words. "You know what?" he finally managed, his voice hoarse from shouting. "I hope you're happy. I hope this is everything you wanted. I hope destroying me on national television makes you feel powerful and important." He threw his crumpled microphone on the floor with a gesture of utter contempt. "But just remember, when the dust settles and people see what you really are, that you chose to be cruel instead of compassionate. You chose ratings over humanity." Without another word, Harry turned on his heel and stormed toward the studio exit, his expensive shoes clicking angrily against the polished floor. His entourage scrambled to follow him, clipboards and phones scattered in their wake, as they tried to keep up with his furious pace. "Prince Harry, wait!" one of the producers called out. But Harry didn't even slow down. He burst through the studio doors with such force that they slammed against the walls, the sound reverberating through the building like a gunshot. Hoda sat in her chair for a moment longer, watching the empty doorway where Harry had disappeared. Then, slowly, she turned back to face the cameras, her professional composure returning as if someone had flipped a switch. "Well," she said with a slight smile, her voice carrying just a hint of satisfaction, "I think that tells our viewers everything they need to know about Prince Harry's relationship with the truth." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before continuing. "When we come back, we'll be talking to Dr. Sarah Chen about her groundbreaking research on childhood trauma and resilience." The cameras cut to commercial, but the damage was done. In less than 30 minutes, Prince Harry had destroyed years of carefully crafted public relations work, revealing himself to be exactly what his critics had always claimed: a privileged, petulant man who crumbled under the slightest pressure. As the studio crew began resetting for the next segment, the sound of screeching tires could be heard from the parking garage below, followed by the roar of an expensive engine disappearing into the Manhattan traffic. Prince Harry was gone, but the echoes of his spectacular meltdown would reverberate through the media landscape for months to come. The interview was over, but Hoda had emerged victorious, having exposed the truth that Harry's handlers had spent years trying to hide, that beneath the carefully constructed image of a wounded prince lay nothing more than a spoiled child who couldn't handle being held accountable for his own words and actions.